That being said, my goal is the best that I can to try to explain his point. I think he's got a good point, all right? So we'll see how we'll build a little bit off of what John Locke said with his idea of this identity being the psychological continuity. He'll play off of that, and we'll see what he has to say on this. But a few things before we get started directly on him. All right, so sometimes I think because of a survey course like this, we're seeing blotches of this person and that person, and we don't have like a continuity. Like, what do these people fit into their overall thought? Who are they? That type of stuff. This guy's a 20th century philosopher. He really was after integrity and how do we identify ourselves and what are the core values that we do. And then how do those core values become who we are and in that continuity? So there's quite an ethical component in what he's saying. And another idea that he's really trying to play off of is he doesn't want us alienated from our own core values. So if we can get to the base of who we are, like our identity and what makes us person, then we could start to look at what are those things that may necessarily be disconnecting us from that, who is who we are. So if we use words all the time, or phrases, terms, right? Common good. Just when we say, should we all be working for the common good? Well, who wouldn't nod their heads in that? But those two terms aren't so self-evident, What would be common amongst us? Well, you have to have, now we're talking about social and natural kind. So what is common among us? And then just to use the word good, it's almost like, well, yeah, who's not for good? It's like saying, are you against love? But what is good for us? So we'd have to know something common about us, and then what is good for that, and then we could talk together. This would be for the common good. So these issues about personal identity and selfhood and such, they have really deep import just for the peace of mind that we have in our own lives. To be at peace with ourselves, right? I mean, are you going to go out and find it, or are you going to try to look for it on the inside, like some of the philosophers that we've seen? You hear even spirituality, I don't care if it's Christianity, Buddhism, whatever, about being self-centered, centering yourself, right? What does even that mean? And, so a lot of this stuff, it may seem like it's disconnected. I hope at least a little bit I've tried to make a point as to how this connects, to our lives and has meaning for us. So let me just ask you, whatever it is, without really arguing what is the core of your identity, what do you think in our lives sometimes alienates us from who we are, or from discovering who we are? What do you think?
Social pressures.
Yeah. Yeah, and all kinds. Like, what, can you name one, you might think of?
I think trying to fit in and be someone you're not because of, I guess, things that are
So it's that old, how you're perceived, right? Yeah, okay, that's true, yeah.
Kind of like that, the materialism that goes along with that, kind of create a different person for who you are.
Yeah, and that's no little thing. I've known people professionals, like doctors and such, that would move or do certain things just because they felt sort of it's not like everybody says it, right? It's like high school freshers. Nobody comes out and says you don't fit in, but they didn't feel like they fit in. Their house was too plain, right? And you start to think well, do I play the part? Yeah, that's true. That can alienate from ourselves too. What else do you think?
like stereotypes, kind of.
Like what?
Stereotypes.
Yeah, stereotypes, right? That's right, because there's always generalizations. We all might fit in this particular group, but just because I'm in that group doesn't mean that I have that, right? And oftentimes, people are reactionary too. That's not necessarily good, right? Somebody will be different for the sake of being different. Like if somebody says to you, "Well, I never go along with the masses. I always do the opposite." Well, is that really thinking any deeper? I mean, it doesn't take much thought to do the opposite of everybody else. So it's almost like you want to be your own self, but you don't really know. But see, there again, we talk about what does it mean to be you. What else do you think might alienate yourself? Alienate you from yourself? Did you ever No? Maybe I should have wrote down some ideas here. Let's see. There's a lot of I guess I was thinking another place I teach economics, justice and stuff, and we talk about how just, our role as consumers, it really affects who we are. And it's sort of under the current. I mean, there's always these jokes, it's not a joke, but I mean these things where people will say that, advertisers or the government, whatever entity you want to bring, keep us, placated just enough so that we don't overly question what we're doing. So in other words, just give everybody enough comfort so that they don't feel uncomfortable, and give them just enough, ability to buy what they want so they always feel like they can have more, yet they'll never quite be satisfied, and you don't want to feel that satisfaction. There's always that going on. So I mean, the government, plays roles, and we're all complicit in these things too, right? So anyway, I think this is where some of this has import anyway. And even when we start using words like I and we, again, these are such simple things. They just like roll off of our tongue, but we don't often stop and think exactly, what do we mean by this? When I speak of myself as a human person, that requires a little bit of reflection. What do you think it means in life if somebody were to say to you to be an intentional person? What do you think that means?
Do things with a purpose.
Okay.
Have an intention for everything that you do, not like just doing it.
Okay, yeah, you're not just going with the flow, but like, how would you direct that intention then, right? I mean, that almost begs the next question. If you're going to be an intentional person, and you're going to do things with a purpose, what would the purpose lead to? I mean, self-gain? That'd be utilitarianism? You just following the rules? I mean, even if they're good rules, like a deontology, how do we determine this? Has anybody ever heard or seen, well, first of all, have you seen the movie Patch Adams? Anybody seen the movie Patch Adams? You have? Okay. You have? Do you guys know what it is? Okay. It's a movie based loosely off of a real man's life. Robin Williams plays Dr. Patch Adams.
The dude that put patient tomato soup on it, take a bath on it.
Could be.
Like spaghetti or something?
Could be. Yeah, I think there is something to that. I don't remember the whole movie, but now I don't know. I know I've watched enough documentaries on the real man's life, but I don't remember, the story between what was in the movie and what was in his life. It's been too long. But he was a genius in med school. One of these guys that in the movie they have him down as they would try to get him for cheating because he just didn't have to study like the other people. But and this is so important, like in medical ethics especially, it's really in any ethics, that you always see the other person as a human first, right? So there's one scene that I'd always use in ethics where he's an intern in the hospital, and it's him and like 5 doctors, and they're going around and the specialist is explaining what's going on. This patient has been suffering from, diabetic neuropathy, and, somebody goes, well, what do you think should happen here? Well, first we'll try antibiotics, but it could be amputation. And the woman's there like, what in God's name are you saying? And Patch Adams is like, what's her name? I don't know. And it's like, that's the first thing. It's like, who is this person here, right? So this was his deal. Now, this is very extreme, right? So I'm not advocating this. But he was so disenfranchised with the way the medical system. He said, I want to heal people, and all I'm doing is I'm caught up in this industry, So you're gonna have to find ways in your own lives how do you do good in whatever field you go to, because you might feel the same exact thing. I don't care if you become an accountant or you become a lawyer. You might feel like I'm part of the system. How do I do good while I'm here? So what he did was he started his own institute. He called it the Gesundheit Institute. And he would dress like a clown. And it was totally free. Nobody paid anything. But you also couldn't sue. And there was no liability, no nothing. And obviously they can't treat everything. But it was almost like the commercials you hear from St. Jude's Hospital. Nobody pays coming in. But he was really disenfranchised from the whole system. But when you interviewed him, and they said, like, how nobody just gets to where they are, right? I mean, we're a development as individuals. And he had said he was so depressed all his life. He said, I tried to commit suicide at least twice. And I think he was hospitalized once for it. And he said, and then he had a eureka moment. He literally said, I've decided at one moment to never be unhappy again. I realized it was all on me. And he said, and from that moment on, I wanted to be an intentional person. Every single thing I did, it was aimed at this, and it was always for the good of something else, right? So this is a formation of personal identity. So what he was doing was he was developing the I, the selfhood. And, we'll see that, it includes memories, but it's probably not just that. So, if you have recollections of, us going through Locke and that seemed like it was on to something, but it wasn't quite it, well, that's how most people feel about that, right? There's something to our memories being part of our personal identity, but, it's hard to understand that that'd be it. And that's part of what Williams is going to be driving at here. And he's got a kind of few good insights, right? So it really comes down to, there's this meaning and this integrity. And that's his goal, right? I mean, if you're going to be an intentional person, then there has to be a certain level of integrity. Did we do the healthcare ethics in this debate in this? I get confused. Where there was Wells Fargo, the financial institution, back in 2016 or whatever. It was uncovered that in order for them to make their quotas for opening new accounts or selling insurances, that they were told by their superiors to use their own personal information, but use the customers' names and such. So in other words, they weren't stealing the money, but they were opening up new accounts in their customers' names, but they were using their own personal addresses so that their customers wouldn't know about it. And it even turns out that they went farther and they were selling life insurance and renter's insurance to these people, and some people weren't recognizing it. Well, 3 people at Prudential Life Insurance, I don't know if they're forensic accountants or whatever, but going over realized, hey, what's going on over there at Wells Fargo? And they uncovered what was going on. So, I'm curious, if you worked for Prudential Life Insurance and you uncovered that Wells Fargo employees were selling your renter's insurance and your life insurance unbeknownst to the customers, what would you do? Let me put your cards on the table. Who here would bring it up and make it public? One of you, 2? Come on, intentional people. I wouldn't even have thought twice. We'd all been fired. Those people were fired. Could you imagine? I mean, what did you do wrong? Of course, they weren't fired for whistleblowing, because you can't. That's illegal. But in a right to hire country, you're fired for other reasons. Just happen to be a coincidence that those 3 people. I mean, that's why it gets very difficult. So that's integrity. It's like, it's almost like, can you imagine if like Rosa Parks just said, "I'll move"? I mean, things would have been different. I mean, it's like somebody's got to, step up, right? So what he's trying to get at with the personal identity is, there has to be things that these drives and these interests. Like if we're trying to get to the self, then what are those things that really drive us and point us towards this? Because integrity is, again, it's an easy word to use. Because integrity isn't just being true to yourself. It has to be true to yourself in the context of something that's genuine good. Otherwise, we could all be, as long as we went with whatever we felt was right, we'd all say we'd have integrity. That's not it. It's not even being consistent, right? Because oftentimes we have to change our minds. That's our political climate right now, right? We want people, like I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've learned something and now you've thought differently. Well, could you imagine being a politician doing that today? The minute that a politician comes out and says, well, you know what, the other side's right on this, I think we should understand this better, they're done. I don't care which side of the fence you're on. I mean, they're going to be said, well, see, you were wrong. Now you're admitting it. It's about time. What else are you wrong on? If you're wrong about that, you're probably wrong about other stuff. Well, if you're right about that with us, maybe the other stuff's right too. It's like we painted them into a corner. It's almost like we're begging them not to be people that are intentional, that they really can't follow their conscience, right? So this is what Williams is really after, right? We'll leave it there. Okay, so let's try to make some sense out of what is going on. So I'm doing my best to put it into some sort of visual, because this is necessary for me. So you let me know if this helps you whatsoever, right? So you have person A, and that's I call it A memory, and you have B memory. Now, according to John Locke, that's the individual, right? So whatever that memory is, that's the individual. And the goal is that we're going to transfer A memory into the B body, and we're going to transfer the B memory into the A body. So technically speaking now, the A memory in the B body, we're gonna call that the A person, right? Even though it looks, well, see, that's the two things here on the side, is he puts these little caveats out there. I think because he probably taught high school at one point and realized there's gonna be 5 kids that try to pick apart his analogy, right? So he says, look, first of all, he said, they are going to be sufficiently, you know, how does he say it, physically and psychologically the same, all right? And their mannerisms and everything. So if A and B were walking around, we probably couldn't really tell them apart in their bodies, okay? So this isn't a Freaky Friday where we have a mom and a daughter. It's like we have 2 twin sisters or something, right? And he says, so the A memory inside the B body, even though we're looking at the B body, that's really the A person. And the B memory inside the A body, even though what we're looking at really is the B body, the A body, that's the B person. He says, let's do this transfer, okay? So at this point, we're not too far away from the way Locke said it, right? I mean, Locke, so far, that's where he's at. And remember, according to some continuity of identity, at least in terms of Locke's understanding of psychological continuity, it was the memory. So we're really going to think the person is there on the inside. Wherever the memory is, we're going to follow that and call that the person, okay? So anyway. Now, there's so many different scenarios he did, and I don't think I'm going to walk through each and every single one. Let's do this. Then he comes up with this and says, now let's do these. In these thought experiments, I think this one's pretty good. I mean, there's something to be drawn out of this. In this thought experiment, he says, okay, we're going to make these people choose. You know, that somebody's going to get $100,000 and somebody's going to get tortured. Now, let's just say offhand, if we said, if you were the A memory, okay, and we took your A memory and we put it into the B body, and now that's the A person, and we're going to ask you, would you rather us give the B body or the A body $100,000? You're the A memory going into the B body. What do you think? You're the A memory going into so it's your memory going into some other body and some other memory going into your body. So are you going to choose the $100,000 going into your future body or where your future memory goes? Did you have your hand up?
So I was going to say my future memory.
Your future memory?
I will choose B body because I'm inside B body.
Because you're going inside B body. Okay, well.
But are you conscious of yourself?
So far, okay, so you'll know that's, in other words, you're taking your memories with you. So when they take your memories and put it in the next body, all of your personality goes there. It's
But
just.
would I know that I'm not in the same body?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes, you will. You'll know you're not in the same body. That's the way I understand the experiment. Okay, so most people would say that, right? I mean, if that's my future, I mean, if we want to make this simple, let's pretend like 2 people are going, live in a house and they're going to switch houses. In fact, maybe if I do this again, that would be a better way to make it clear. Okay, one house, we're going to, bring in whoever that lady is that does the organizing. My one daughter likes. Who is that lady? What is it?
Marie Condon.
Yeah, Maria, that's right. Okay, so we're going to bring her in, or we're going to bring in the guys from, some HGTV, and they're going to fix up $100,000 renovation. The other house, we're going to burn it to the ground. Which house do you want to go into? I mean, I'm going to go in that other house, right? Get out of the house that I'm in. Well, he says, well, doesn't that then reinforce that really who you are, the I and the we, and your selfhood is the memories? I mean, he's saying that, because that makes sense. But he's going to challenge this. And he's going to say, but I don't know about that. I mean, in other words, he's not saying that there's not something to it. Don't think he's discounting it. He's going to get at the point that there's something else going on here. That's not enough. I mean, that would be simple as it stands, but there's something else. Now, what if you were not told which body it was going to go into? Okay? So we're going to take you, we're going to put you in the next body, we're going to take that memory and put it into your body, but you don't know who's going to get it. How does this make you feel? Pretend you're the person, you know, that you're gonna transfer, that's not a choice, and you don't get, it's not like there's no third choices. One of those two outcomes, and you don't know which outcome is it gonna be. All you know is that one of those two is gonna be your outcome. If that were you, I mean, what would you think? Just don't be a normal human being. What do you think? Would you be okay with it? You can't negotiate. Would you be anxious? I don't know, would you be like, you know, praying to your lucky stars or whatever? You know?
Well, it's out of your control, right?
It is out of your control. There's absolutely you have no control over that, right? So, but there's a lot of things in our life we have no control over, right? My one, in fact, the guy, he's in his late 90s now, the priest at my parish where I grew up, Father Memorella, he always told us how in World War II he was on all these bomber raids, and he said half the planes returned. He goes, every time you got in the plane, half the planes returned. And he always made up a story about his how he decided to become a priest, and then when he met his brother one time, his brother revealed he was scared crapless and made up 5,000 deals with God. If you get me through this, you know, I'll put on the collar. But nonetheless, you know, I do the same thing. It's like you have no idea, okay? Now, how does that? Well, let's do this. You know, let's say that in that scenario, the B person. So if you were the A memory, no, if you were the B. How do we do this now? See, I got myself goofed up. If you were the B memory and you go into the A body, you're the B person. So good for you, right? I mean, you're going to get the $100,000, and the other individual, you know, they're going to get tortured, okay? Now, here's another little twist. What if you did know prior, but you still had no way to change the scenario, okay? So let's say that you are the B memory person, and you're the A memory. You're going to go into the B body. The A memory is going to go into the A body, but you're already told beforehand the B body's going to get the money. And that's not you. That's almost like certain death. We might think like in a wartime thing, like there's no chance getting out of this. So the idea is that we might say in the first scenario, you know, A is just unlucky because you really didn't know. And we'll say in the second scenario, not only is A unlucky, but holy crap, the anxiety that you must have. Now, his point is, those aren't memories. They're future anxieties. How does that affect your personality and you as person? In other words, remember Locke was kind of working it out that we are an accumulation of all our experiences held in our memories, and then that becomes the psychological continuity for who we are in the future. But Williams is thinking, well, hold on. Sometimes there's circumstances that have not yet occurred that we might be aware of, and that too affects us. Now, there's ways to probably criticize this, so what do you think of that? I mean, it's somewhat clever. I mean, I think. Nonetheless, it gets you thinking. What do you think about it? What would be a critique about it? Because if there's something there that doesn't seem right, like what do you think it is that doesn't seem right yet?
He's saying that it would change. He's saying that he would change because it's a future experience, but he still kind of experienced the news of it, so it's still an experience.
Yeah.
Like I could say that the fact that he experienced getting the news of that he would be tortured is kind of an experience in itself. So it's still based on past experiences, because if he wouldn't have known, he wouldn't have changed.
Okay. What do you think of Carlos's explanation? Yeah, that's what I thought, you know. I thought it's clever. And, you know, there might be something there. This might be something you have to think about, because it could be that they're not entirely off, you know, because we are, you know, we are in a sense, you know, future selves too. But I didn't quite grasp how that itself was not embedded in an experience by itself. It just seemed like it wasn't working for me. It's interesting, right? I think he's added, and I'm not quite sure where exactly it is, but I think he's added some sort of dynamic to John Locke's, you know, psychological continuity. But, you know, I'm not quite sure that he's really derailed it. It doesn't seem that way for me per se. Anyway. What do you think? All right. Now, he plays other scenarios too. And I'm not quite sure how these are all different, but they're a nice dynamic to add to it, right? With Nicolas Cage and John Travolta, is that movie called Face Off? Does anybody know? Is that what it was called? Do you guys know the story of that? So he was like government agency or something. Yeah, I'm not sure. John, you guys know who those two characters are? John Travolta and Nicolas Cage. So John Travolta he was the evil guy. We'll just leave it simple, right? He was the evil guy, and Nicolas Cage. Do I have that right? And Nicolas Cage was a loving father and worked for, you know, he was done with his CIA work or whatever the heck it was. But he had to go undercover, and he had to go undercover as the other man. So he had to go in full reconstructive surgery. So in other words, he literally was a memory going into B body and now a person. I mean, you couldn't have come up with a clear, you know, exposition of what both Locke and Williams here was talking about. And this, you know, what kind of effect do you think that would be? Like, what kind of effect do you think, like, let's just picture, maybe you don't care for your particular physique or your looks or something, and you get to choose. And you choose somebody else. What do you think that would do to your psyche? Wouldn't it be something? What do you think?
I think it will change not because of how you look, but how people, the different experiences you'll have. Because what will change is not what you feel in terms of like your personality, but what other people treat you. So like, or say like you're, like, you know, attractive people usually have it like easier in life because I don't know, like it's just human like nature. We treat like attractive people better. So if you're like
I wouldn't know. We'll go ahead.
an extremely ugly person, and then you change into the greatest looking person in the world, your as a personality wouldn't change at first, but then as you experience how people treat you differently, your character will change. But not because of your physical change directly, but because of the experiences you had after changing.
Okay. What do you think of that? Anything to add to that? So then, what's the relationship between your physical structure and your memories and your emotions? All of a sudden, it's not as clear that we're inside, right? I mean, maybe we couldn't be the same people without these bodies. And if I was in somebody else's body, you know, we might like to think that you captured my personhood and placed it into another entity, but then how would that be me, right? As not only that, I think in the text it actually said that it's one thing for me to look at you, like, does anybody here really think that it looks like you when you see a picture of yourself? I mean, like usually, like you see a picture of yourself and you're going like, what the hell is that, you know? Or have you heard your voice, like recorded? It doesn't sound like it, you know, because, you know, right now, for my voice, it's resonating, you know, inside, you know, my nasal cavities and everything else, and I'm not hearing it from the outside, but you're hearing it from the outside, and I hear you from the outside. But if I were able to take over one of your bodies and your voice and look, I might look in the mirror and go, that's not what I thought you looked like. You know, in other words, I'm not quite sure now this works. You know, I mean, that's how it laid it out. I mean, so this is an interesting connection between, you know, what we would call like just the memory and how it's attached to who we are as human beings. It's not as clear cut, right? So the self-reflected face, he says, it looks different, right? And I think he even talked too about, maybe the guy had a bum leg. And now, my leg, it's like you guys can have my knees and then you'll know when it rains, stuff like that, I mean, all these things that we don't know how these then become an accumulation of our personality. It's not just simply what's inside. So you can kind of see how, Descartes, the guy inside there is not really work for us. At least it doesn't for me, right? Because we're almost back to the Men in Black. We're not driving around in these little figures from the inside. And it's not just a carcass, right? So when somebody says don't judge the book by a cover, that's probably true, but maybe our bodies aren't exactly just covers. They might be integral to who we are as self. So anyway, I thought it's a nice little thing to put in. So there's some little good nuggets here that he throws out that says, again, Locke's probably onto something with this psychological continuity and the memory being the consciousness. But maybe that's not it. Maybe memory's just part of it. And even that, remember how some of the other philosophers we said how this idea of the soul, if you're going to hold the idea of the soul, could be like intellect, memory, and rationality and such, and will. I mean, other things too come into play. And you really can't disconnect these from who we are as human beings. So the idea that maybe we can cryogenically, well, maybe, I can't remember if it was, I think it was Walt Disney that just had part of him cryogenically frozen, not the whole body, so that 1,000 years from now maybe they could reanimate it, but then who would that person be? Would he still be the same? It's interesting to think about. Okay, then he says, what if you had this scenario where the A memory has anxiety, and then the B memory goes into the A body? They would lose that. He says they would lose that anxiety, but we'd also bring our anxieties with us, right? So, if the A memory was afraid of heights, and the A memory goes according to the original scenario into the B body, becomes the A person, you still grasp that, all right? But even this, I was wondering, when I read that, what do you think about that? I mean, on one level, it seems like it's pretty obvious, but it seems like we're almost going back to his original argument, and it's not adding anything new. And I was trying to think in this, why would he have brought that up? And I'm not sure I got it right, but what do you think about that? Agility. I mean, could part of, I wonder if some of our fears are embedded in our ability to maneuver. And that if we had, what is that sport? Parquet? What is that? Parkour, right? No. That's right up there. You might as well just crawl to the top of a tower and try to get a selfie. I mean, to me, I don't understand. You're going to hurt yourself. I saw a good meme. It said, on a 10-year-old standing up smiling, and it said, when you're 10 years old, and fall off a roof. And then it had a person, all wrapped up in bandages and casts, and said, when you're 40 years old and you sleep the wrong way. You get to a certain point, it's like, oh my God, if there's one thing I could do when I could go back, I would get rid of a lot of the physical activities that I did that gave me injuries that did nothing for me except they were nagging as you get older. But how did that, my goal through all this, though, is, I wonder how much of that is tied to the body. I mean, so if I had all these, let's say I had anxieties about certain things that happen, or if I fell from a height or something, I wonder in a new body how that would affect you. I mean, you don't know. That body might be very agile. And maybe you had some, I'm just being silly, some inner ear thing, and you didn't have quite the balance that you thought. Some people are very cautious with driving, right? Other people, they scoot in and out like they're snakes. Those people are more agile. Whether it's safe or not is another issue. But not everybody be good at that. So who knows, maybe that person has high eye and hand coordination that it just excel, and it doesn't seem to be like it's not as big as a risk to them person. So I wonder if I were put into a body that maybe exhibited things that would not place me in the same amount of risk, would I keep some of that? I'm not sure. I'm thinking out loud.
Have you seen the new Jumanji, the new version they did?
No, I didn't know they made a new Jumanji.
It's like it's funny because I thought about it because one of the characters like this nerd, and then he goes into the body of the Rock. And he's like, I'm so strong, and like he like, starts like running and stuff. But the first time he like changed into the body,
Oh, yeah?
so it's kind of like that. It's like talking about the opposite. So it's like this dude doesn't have any muscles and stuff turns into a rock.
Yeah, which makes a real, body-mind connection there, because, you get it, material, immaterial connection, that maybe we're not as dislocated from these, these carcasses as we think, okay? And the other one was the same thing, if B memory has frightful memories. Now, I'm not quite sure how that would work, but then again, too, who knows? I mean, we're physiological beings, so it could be that in the new body, whatever makeup we have chemically could be different. I mean, of course, not all depression is, it's chemically based, but it's not all just from a chemical imbalance. But let's pretend that a person that did suffer from depression went into a person that had a physiology of just an extreme, well-connected hormonal system. They may not have that same anxieties. It's hard to say. Even people's hormones, right? Like my daughter, my wife, when they gave birth, it was 14-hour labor. I mean, there was so much pains, all this. I've met other people where it was almost like, going to make a deposit at the store. No joke. How long were you in labor? An hour and a half. Was it pain? Not too bad. You're like, what on earth? I mean, it must just be such a perfect balance of so many conditions that came into effect. Well, again, that's not just your memory. And we can't just say that that goes on to a future memory, too, because I would agree a future memory can almost be a present experience that you're not calling them memory, but it is. But these I'm not so sure about. If we can put some things in the other body, and the body had a different physiology, that could change at least our understanding of a self, and then we can say from there create new memories, perhaps, but who knows, all right? What about this? This was kind of an interesting twist. How about if, okay, so you are the A memory, and you're going into the B body, and the B body is going to be tortured, and I'm telling you that the B body is going to be tortured. So in other words, it's going to be your personality going into the next body, and it's going to be tortured, but relax, because just before you're tortured, you will have some, across the board, amnesia event where we will take away any idea of what's going to happen in the future. How do you think that changes anything in the scenario? Do you think it's just like, okay, now you just playing around?
And a person is no longer a person.
Well, it would be at least it would be a person the way I'm calling it. So you'd have A memory goes into the B body, and I'm calling that the A person.
Yeah,
Okay.
after the
Oh, I get you. Because they had amnesia, they're no longer, okay, very good. Yeah, I wasn't following you. Yeah, I think that's true. They would no longer be that person. And I wasn't quite sure where he was going with this, to be honest. I thought, are we just trying to be clever here, or is there something that's deeper? Anybody else have any thoughts on that? Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, I think he's got something to add to the whole conversation. I think many of us feel that the inside is what counts. And I think when we originally would choose which body we go into, according to which one gets the $100 grand and which one gets tortured, in a sense would almost reinforce John Locke's theory of psychological continuity. But I think if he's done nothing else here, he's thrown a few wrenches in the system to make us think that it's not just that. There's other things at play here. So we're going to leave it at that, but what we're going to do